Good morning, Gate City Rotary. It's good to see everybody this morning, and good to hear the rumble in the crowd. I'm going to ask David Lillard if he would do the invitation.
You pause with me. As we begin this day, let us be reminded of all we have to be thankful for. May we be generous with that which we've been blessed. Lead us to love others, to offer grace and mercy, to seek justice. Remind us of our callings, both individual and corporate, and guide us to serve others with our talents, our gifts, our passion. Let us sow peace where there's discord, and ask forgiveness when we've wronged others. To borrow from Robert Niebuhr, give us grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test in all the things we think, say, and do.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Let's say Mike Bellers, give us a Sergeant of Arms report.
Good morning. This morning we've got 41 members attending, and we have 2 Rotarian guests, Deborah and Robin.
And they'll be introduced, we only have 21 people?
40.
Thank you. I thought so. And we have a special guest over here, Matthew.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Charlotte's here to have breakfast with us again. I think her punishment for not behaving well 3 weeks ago has finally been lifted, so she's excited.
I thought she was a member.
Let's see. We have some birthdays and anniversaries, don't we? This week?
We do. We do.
There's Rick.
We have one of each. Big list today, long list. Hoping I didn't miss anybody. The major list was not Steve. And so I had to go through manually and pull them out because they're not sorted, Steve. Anyway. Yeah. All right, first, member birthdays. Dr. Langdon. Dave Bussy on the 16th of March. Is that right? And it's happy birthday to you, sir. All right, I almost get to sing, not quite. And club anniversaries at the same table, Mr. Mark Reynolds. And how many? 16. Yes, sir. That man a treat. Good job. And that wraps us up.
Thank you very good. And I just want to thank Mark Luttrell for arranging our program last week. You know the beauty, and you get this at Gate City Rotary. If you miss a meeting, you can watch it on the video. And Jeff, thank you for always putting those up on the website so we can do makeups online. But great program last week. And I noticed everything went smoothly with Walt at the helm, so we're in for a treat next year. It just was flawless. Gigi was here to do an announcement on the district conference, and I don't see her this morning. So I'd like to say, Walt, it's flawless under your leadership. And so just a quick plug for the district conference, April 26th in Greenville, Greenville. Hope you've looked at the announcement that came out on the email. Love to have a big group turn up for that. That's going to be a fun weekend. And thank you for Kelly Hill. First, what I understand, first timers that sign up and attend the register for the conference, 2 polls for an incredible weekend at Grandover. And if you're a seasoned attendee of the district conference, 1 poll for you. So what a great thing. I appreciate Kelly. I don't see him here right now to thank personally for that. Matthew, let's talk about what's coming up on the near horizon for projects.
Good morning, everybody. Due to weather-related issues, we are getting ready to be very busy. I've decided on my own, without any consultation, that Saturday, we're just going to meet and pick up trash at World Beers at 8:30.
There you go.
It's not raining. It's the only Saturday in the past 7 we've had it's not. So maybe we can get together and pull this off. I'll send an email out this morning. Let's see. March 30th, Victory Junction Game Camp. We've got that project going on. There's sign-ups out there. There's a sign-up genius out. It's about half full for the fundraiser that Guy can speak on later if he wants to. And it is April 20th. We're going to Camp Carefree to do a couple small projects there. So basically, from here till June, every 2 to 3 weeks, we're doing something. So I'm excited about it. Y'all sound excited about it. So let's get it done. Thank you.
Yes, we are. You know, if meal packing wasn't your thing, we have outdoor projects. So something fun, something different for everybody, and to utilize and leverage individual skills. Let's see, Guy Rabondi, you've got your back to me. You're not waving at me, so I don't know if that means you don't want to make an announcement on an upcoming event, but
I think I want to make an announcement. So we've already gotten, received 7 or 8 sponsorships, and more than 75% of those are coming from the club. So really, to make this big, we need to get people outside. And if you wait until the last minute, you're not going to get people, right? So now is the time to ask. If you ask, I will make sure they get their tickets, they get all their stuff early enough that they can give them out to their employees. We get lots of people there, we have a big party. Wait till the last minute, they don't give them to anybody, nobody comes, we have a crappy party. So who wants a good party?
good party. Good party.
All right, so ask now. And I sent a bunch of stuff. If you haven't received it, you can text me, you can email me, you can call me, you can come to my office. I will give you anything you want to help you get this stuff.
You can't ask for more than that. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that the guy does not want to be assembling sponsor packages the Wednesday night before the event and worrying about how to get them to the sponsor and if the sponsor's going to give the tickets out. So let's help Walt out on that. David Lillard, can I call you up at this time? Always a special morning when we get to present. Oh. David, where's your red badge?
Buster, do you have your red badge?
Now, you can't use Buster's red badge. No. There's an exchange that goes on here. But because you've done so much for the club, I guess we'll have to make an exception and present you with what we used to call the blue badge, and now it's really the white badge. We're completing all the orientation and checklist items. Congratulations, David. Buster, how about some happy dogs?
How about some happy dogs? Y'all missed me last week.
Yes,
I love watching that. It's so much fun watching Bobby do grandpappy. It's just watching all the videos.
He's your grandfather.
I think I just heard $2.
So I had a meeting downtown at the old courthouse, back in this back conference room with some of the employees and architects, and talking about some projects. And this woman starts screaming, and we all looking at each other. You know, I didn't know whether to run to her aid, or try to find an egg. I mean, we're back in this dark little conference room. And we all look, and she comes running in, and she's got the state Clemson game on, and there's 2 seconds left.
I'm guessing she was a state.
I can't.
Well, I just want to thank Buster for allowing Charter Brothers to put some carpet in down at Lewis Storage. Thank you, Buster.
Thanks for the invoice.
I'll go back to the store.
I made this announcement a couple weeks ago when we had something at Salvation Army, but Mike Conrad chastised me this week for not knowing. So my wife and I are pregnant with our first child. So you
No, I knew. Eventually, we're going to have the whole warehouse carpeted.
Okay.
Steve.
I've got a few happy dollars. I spent the last week mostly in Bogota, Colombia, and it was by all means the most fantastic vacation I've ever taken. I've had some good ones. Many thanks to Chip Vale and the folks at First Citizens for setting me up with some Colombian pesos before I left, and that was helpful. It was just absolutely, it's an amazing country that's done such a resurgence since the end of their civil war, and it's booming, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's kind of nice to be back here where I can breathe because it's 8,000 feet and the air is a little thinner, and I have some lung issues, so that was a little challenging. But anyway, it was great, and included in that is a little bit of a thank you, the equivalent of excuse me, 4 million Colombian pesos. And thanks to so many of you staying in touch with me while I was on vacation, Rick. Rick. And the others. Anyway.
Good answer.
Well, Grandpappy told me one time, he said, if you're ever attacked by a bear, said the best thing to do is just play dead. Said it's really good practice when in a few minutes you will actually be dead. I really thought I'd get a bigger laugh. I'm sure laughing at that all week.
That usually does.
Did you really? I don't know, maybe a joke that didn't involve death would be. I don't know. Today, Steve Mackler is going to be presenting for us. And I asked Steve for a short bio, and he said, well, short version, you know, periodontist, married to Leslie. And he sent me an attachment, and so I just sent it to the printer. Came home, and it literally was 6 pages, single-spaced. And it's absolutely incredible. I know Steve has done a whole lot for the dental community and a lot for the local community and the international community, but I had no idea, going back to all the honors that Steve has had, and it would be impossible for me to go through it. Some of the dentists in the room know what a fantastic periodontist he is and what great care he's taken of our patients, but I had no idea of all the honors, everything that's been bestowed upon Steve is really incredible. And it just made me feel so small to look at that huge list of everything that he's achieved. So at any rate, today we're going to learn something about international grants, and particularly I think about Steve's work in Moldova. And please welcome Steve Mackler.
Well, good morning and thank you. Thanks to the club for inviting me to come here and talk about grants in general and global grants in particular. And basically, there are 4 things you have to remember. I know this club has done lots of grants, so it's like preaching to the choir, but when you're writing grants, there are 4 basic core values that you have to have in order for this to be successful. And one is a credible partner in the country that you're going to or the other place here, timely communications, detailed site visit, and you need some passionate volunteers. And I want to share with you my history of Rotary, which started about 33 years ago in the jungles of Brazil, about 800 miles up the Amazon River. I was with a fellow Rotarian named Bob Kriegsman, and I had been asked to join Rotary years ago, and I said, well, you know, it's just another meeting to go to, and I really didn't know what Rotary was. And Bob said, Steve, we need to go to a Rotary meeting. I said, here in the middle of the jungle? And he said, yeah. So we went, and it was all in Portuguese, and they were translating. But I saw all the projects that Rotary does on an international basis, from clean water to providing an ambulance to education in the school. And I came back and I asked a fellow colleague of mine who had asked me to join Rotary 10 years ago, and I said, well, is it too late to join? And he said no. And so we went to Rotary to Brazil, to the jungles of Brazil through a Rotary grant. And as a professional dentist, if you decided to go for 1 month, they would pay for your airline fare. So we did this for 3 years in a row. I'd never taken a month vacation in my life, and I was scared to death. And it was the best thing I ever did. It was like being on another planet. And looking back, no phone calls at night, no records, no charts, no having to worry about the financial arrangements. You could just go and do your thing. And this clinic in the jungles of Brazil was founded by a Catholic priest who had a little boat and would go up and down the river and minister to people. And he came back to Chicago and started fundraising, and Rotary founded this clinic, which was state-of-the-art in the middle of nowhere. So after about the third year, people in Rotary International had heard that we've been going to Brazil. So a club in Cochabamba, Bolivia said, we need you to come and help us evaluate the need for dental care for street kids. We said, well, we're already halfway around the world. We'll just take another week and go there. And we got off the plane, and all these young folks like you were saying, well, where's all your equipment? And we said, well, you know, we're just coming here to check people, to do a site visit. Well, what had happened, there were 2 Rotary clubs in Cochabamba, the older guys and their sons. And the sons had the new club, so the older guys had decided that the younger guys didn't have enough to do, so they gave us to these younger people, but didn't tell the younger folks why we were coming. So we get off the plane and they said, well, we have given appointments to street children, one every 15 minutes for the next 3 days. Basically, we did examinations, we went to the dental school, we got the kids what we could treated, and we helped them analyze what they would need to do to provide kids dental care. And we came back and we got an architect to design a clinic, and they did. And I went around the Rotary Club like this and spoke and raised about $10,000. We filled out the grant, we sent it down there, and then all of a sudden these 2 Rotary clubs started fighting about who was going to take credit for this new clinic. We said, you got to be kidding. All you have to do is just sign your name. And they would not do it. So Stuart Fountain was the district governor at that time. I said, Stuart, what do we do? He said, well, just put the money in the bank and let's see what happens. And it was a couple of months, 6 months. They could not agree. So fast forward, and Bob Kriegsman and I won another Rotary grant in Bangladesh, which was way on the other side of the world. And we were on this little island with 1,000 people, about 70% Muslim, 30% Hindu, and 2 Jewish boys. And I was wondering, boy, if they don't like me, there's no way I'm going to get off this island. I was a little scared. Anyway, it was great. The Rotary had a boat, and we went up and down the river, and we threw out the gangplank, and there was an ophthalmologist, a pharmacist, and 2 dentists. And it was the most expanding cultural experience I have ever had in my life. And I saw more disease than I'd ever seen in my life. So the mayor, or the head man of the little village, said, I own all this land in here in this island, and I will donate that if you can help me build a clinic. Well, I had a bad taste in my mouth from Cochabamba, Bolivia, and I said, well, we'll see what we can do. Came back, and about 2 months later got a phone call from a district governor in Iowa whose wife was a physician's assistant who had followed us to this little place in Bangladesh. And he had the same story. He said, Steve, the local leader of the village wants to build a clinic. What can we do? And I said, I can give you $10,000. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is the value of Rotary and matching grants. That $10,000 has resulted in about a $450,000 health care clinic in this area that is self-sustaining, has a sliding scale for people. So there must have been 30 Rotary clubs on 2 continents. You know, and they all had the district grants, and that was matched, and then Rotary matched that. So the value of what grants can do, and even though Bolivia didn't quite have the Rotary 4-way test, it seemed to work. Another story about Rotary is In 1999, I was on a medical mission to Bucharest, Romania, and the surgeon said, "Steve, let's go to Moldova." I said, "Great, where is Moldova?" I've never heard of it. And it was about an hour and a half flight. And Moldova is a small country between Romania and Ukraine. And Chernobyl, and I put a little handout on your desk, there's a book that's just come out about the history of Chernobyl and the nuclear accidents. Anyway, Chernobyl's about 150 miles from there, and the wind blows right through there. And there was a tremendous, tremendous incidence of pediatric cancer at a hospital that we visited. So came back, and those older guys like me, men and women, may remember Pam Barrett, who was head of hospice here in Greensboro. And I said, "Pam, I know where Rotary can build another hospice, because the first hospice ever that was built in the Soviet Union was built by this district, by the Greensboro Rotary Club in Kirov, Russia." And I said, "We can build another one, but you've never heard of this country." Not only had she heard of the country, but her coworker had just adopted a little girl, and she said, "Well, did you know that Moldova has a relationship with North Carolina? There's a program called the State Partnership, where the federal government has partnered with countries, about 65 countries around the world, to help these countries move from totalitarianism, communism, and things to democracy." So, wound up going to Moldova and met some wonderful people, and then started taking dental students and other healthcare people, professionals, to Moldova in 2000. And in fact, there's a group that's leaving tomorrow from Chapel Hill, 6 students and 4 professors, and they go to orphanages and they treat the kids there. And they interact with the Moldovan students and Moldovan faculty. It's been a great program. So when I talked to Pam Barrett about building this hospice in Moldova, we worked together, all the Rotary clubs in this area, and we wrote a grant, and it was approved. But they said, "We've run out of money." An anonymous donor in the Greensboro Club wrote a check for $65,000. And that was the second hospice ever, the first in Moldova, the second in the Soviet Union that was built. That's what Rotary and Rotary grants can do. So I'm just a cheerleader right now for Rotary and their grants. You know, when you're a dentist, and Charlie and Walt can identify this, the whole world comes through your office and lays there in your chair. You sit there talking to them. And as far as what I do, if they have a skill set that I think might be interesting for a teaching standpoint, and if they have a passport, I tell them about Moldova. And that was the first nurse that I recruited from my dental chair. You know, when you have, I hate to say this, sharp instruments and stuff like that, they can't really say no. So this process, this program in Moldova started in about 2000 with 1 nurse, and it has grown tremendously. You can see on your table the handout of all the grants that this district and your club and our club and everybody has supported for nursing education in Moldova. They have 5 nursing colleges, which is a little level below GTCC. And they just don't appreciate the value of what a good, highly trained nurse can do. So I don't want to steal the thunder. I want to introduce one of the most dynamic nursing professors, women, I have ever worked with in my life, Deborah McCann, who's a professor at UNCG, and she has been one of the lead movers and shakers in all these grants, and Deborah is going to take on the rest of the story. Thank you.
While that warms up and you all are warming up, Greetings, good morning. I bring you greetings from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and I'm really honored and pleased to be here today. I thought only nurses were up about this time in the morning, out about, but I'm impressed, and I'm not surprised that Rotarians are too, and enjoying such a beautiful breakfast and fellowship together. I'll be spending some moments with you this morning to talk about our experiences in Moldova over the past 5 or 6 years that builds on what Steve talked about in terms of the work, the humanitarian work and the medical work that he's done in Moldova that extends across various different projects. But he did provide a linkage and lifeline between nursing in Moldova and nursing in Greensboro. So we've had this wonderful collaboration over the past 5 or 6 years to look at ways that we can help advance the profession of nursing. So in Moldova, think about this. When we think about nursing, we know, and you think about what is a nurse, we know that nurses have licensing, they have a scope of practice. Nurses can do certain things that facilitate health and well-being in various contexts, such as hospitals and in the community and in hospice. In Moldova, there isn't a nurse categorization. The term medical assistant is used to describe nurse, but there are various pathways to be called a medical assistant or a nurse. And so what has been part of our mission is to help form and inspire a nurse identity in Moldova so that they can understand globally what is the scope of practice of nursing, what is a nurse, what are the core values and practices of nurses that differentiate nurses from a good person who has a caring heart or a physician. And so we think about what is the science of nursing, but also what is the passion and caring element of nursing. And so we have been exploring that and learning as much from nurses in Moldova as we've been able to impart to them. And so I just want to show you this little landscape. It's a little difficult to see, but Moldova is a beautiful country. It's very small. It's about the size of Maryland, about 3.5 million people. So it's just, it's a beautiful country with such great relational qualities. People there are very connected to one another. There are very strong family connections, friendship connections. And so we've understood more about the culture so that we can tailor the kinds of things we do in Moldova based on these strengths. I'd like to acknowledge and recognize the support of Rotary, particularly the Guilford and Greensboro clubs. The Guilford Club has been a driving force to have put as we understand the wind beneath our wings that has helped us move forward. Every year we have, Steve has populated our, I guess, to-do list with all kinds of opportunities of ways that we could become more involved. I also want to recognize the fact that we've had great support from the local nursing community, and I'd like to recognize the dean here from the School of Nursing, UNCG, Dr. Robin Remsburg. We're really happy she could be here. It's hard to get on her calendar, but it really underscores the importance of this work and the fact that this is something that we're doing that, imagine, you can change a country based on one nurse at a time, as well as collectively from the top level, looking at the structure and processes of nursing education. I also want to recognize the North Carolina Department of the State Department and Elaine Marshall. She's been involved since the beginning of the bilateral partnership and has been, this work with Moldova is very much at the top of her list, and there are many things that she's been involved in over the years, from facilitating and endorsing projects like ours, in addition to other humanitarian and medical work, as well with deploying the National Guard to help us if we need it. So when we've been there, we've always known that there are National Guard that are there that we can call on if we need help, but as well they also have provided airlifts of medical equipment and supplies that we've been able to get from UNC and from Duke and from Wilmington, which, we went through the storage area and found things that we thought would be helpful in Moldova. finally, I'd like to acknowledge the Republic of Moldova, in particular, the Ministry of Health, which we are in contact with when we are there. They know what we're doing. The education we do gets approved, and the nurses are provided a certificate of achievement and accomplishment, as well as the Ministry of Education, which has been instrumental in us developing educational initiatives at the national level. So here's where Moldova is. You can see that it's tucked away right there in the middle between the Ukraine and Romania. It's very tiny. It's the smallest Eastern European country. It's the least resource. It's very poor. It's the poorest country in Europe. And the main products are agriculture, but oh my, Moldovan wine. Right, Steve? Oh, and Dr. Remsburg, every trip we've been taken on wine tours because they have amazing wineries. In fact, one winery was the primary winery for the USSR, and another winery is the main supplier to the British Queen. She puts in her order for 1,000 bottles of a particular wine, and she's like everyone else getting in line for the really beautiful wines that are in Moldova. In fact, most recently, the New York Times, I think, had a top 10 wineries in Moldova. I think was up in the number 1 or number 2 or 3. It's one of those places that has great agricultural environments for wine. However, similar to other countries, Moldova is experiencing an aging population. So despite, improvements in health care in general globally, what Moldova has experienced are the combination of environmental hazards like Chernobyl, in addition to pollution and the consequences of smoking, that has not only perhaps shortened their lifespan by about 8 or 10 years compared to the US, but in addition there's increasing disease and disability. So even if you're living to be 70, you're much more disabled and chronically ill. To top that off, getting medicine and getting even medical care is very difficult. And the system in Moldova has, as a post-Soviet economy, has had difficulties transitioning from, a healthcare for all, where somebody could always get something, to where now the resources are so limited that you have access to care, and the federal processes provide some limited access. It's just that there are such limited resources that you are unlikely to have the medicines that you need or the diagnostic tests that you need. For example, if you have diabetes, if you need insulin, you need to go to a clinic to get a dose. You can't get insulin. You may not be able to get your tablets, your diabetes tablets for managing diabetes. So huge problem. Diabetes was one of the topics that I selected last year to take information to nurses so that they could look at, okay, we understand that lifestyle factors and health behaviors have a huge impact. 40 to 50% of your outcome is going to be due to how you live your life. If we can move people in the direction of health and wellness, reduce the prevalence and disability and impact of diabetes, that can be a good thing. The other thing about the aging population is that there are more older people living in Moldova, but there's a huge migration issue because of the economy. People are leaving, and adults in the working age workforce domain are leaving Moldova to find better jobs so that they can provide for their families. But who are they leaving behind? The older people and the children. So you have a huge preponderance of orphanages in Moldova, just enormous number of orphanages, and then old people that are in the villages living alone with very little support. And this is in the context of a culture that has really strong relational ties to family. So it's very, very challenging, but the migration situation is difficult for this population, because of the economy. Steve gave a nice summary of Moldova, the North Carolina-Moldova partnership, and basically this has been very durable and has had great support and recognition from the State Department, and also actually by national leaders. So we understood that it was several years ago, there was a celebration in Raleigh hosted by the State Department, recognizing all of the different humanitarian and medical and economic projects that were done in North Carolina in collaboration with Moldova. And and learned that there is great recognition nationally. I think it was Senator Hillary Clinton that made note of North Carolina being a model for the way that this partnership has evolved and worked. So how did nursing get involved? Most recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, Steve had received some contact from Moldova that there was interested in some nursing education in some particular areas, and so he made some connections with the universities in Greensboro and with Cone Health, and so there was then constructed a team of nurses that came together to respond to this call for education in the areas, actually geriatrics, oncology, palliative care, hospice, and leadership, and a hospital management. And so in our first years, we did education that was going to focus on helping nursing develop understandings of what is the best evidence now for how we do practice in our nursing practice regarding geriatrics, oncology, and so forth. And then we also wanted to look at ways that nurses could be the direct link to the health and well-being of the population. And in fact, in our connections and meetings with the Ministry of Health, as well as some representatives from the World Health Organization in Moldova, we learned that there was a strong view and endorsement of nursing as a critical link in the economic well-being of the economy of the population, because unless you have a healthy population, you can't have workers who can fulfill and contribute to the workforce and a thriving economy. And so let's shift to talking about, well, what does nursing in Moldova look like? And so you can see that I've been in nursing a number of years, and when I entered nursing, I can remember when there were, I guess it was, you had beds that were crank beds, right? You had IV bottles that were glass instead of plastic things, and you had, basically, a very stripped down, very functional looking environment. Well, we saw that in Moldova, where the buildings are just old, and they have not undergone major capital improvements because there isn't the money. We see that nurses, which they, the medical assistants, and they do see themselves as nurses, are working with equipment and supplies from the 70s, and yet there was keen interest in learning about ways of doing things differently. Our approach in a very resource-limited context is that this knowledge is free, and when you get up, and you go out to do your work, you're going to do things plan A or plan B. Why not do it in a more evidence-based way, based on best practices and ways that can improve and have an impact on outcomes? So we've been inspired to provide the kind of education that meets their needs, and so we've focused our areas in a couple of directions. One has been education and consultation to connect and help share information about what our practices in care of older adults, care of individuals with cancer, hospice, and basic care for home providers who provide home care as well as hospice work. We've provided lectures and on the unit consultations with regard to leadership. What do nurses do in the States that makes them a leader? How do they connect with physicians and in the service of advancing health and well-being of people? We also were asked to talk about concepts related to mental health. In the Soviet Union and then of course in Moldova, talking about mental health issues is a very taboo thing. And in fact, even talking to the patient about their diagnosis and about what their treatment is all about is something that's not done. And so in fact, when we were at the oncology hospital, there were people there that didn't know they had cancer because the doctor didn't want to upset them. And they just thought, well, we're getting treatment. Now, I promise you that anybody who is going through that process knows, intuitively they know that they probably have cancer, but it's not talked about. So it's interesting. So nurses asked us, how do we talk to the patient? How do we talk with them about their symptoms, about providing care? One of the things I learned in the first year I did my teaching, I created this 10-module core curriculum for gerontological nursing. It's something I do, I understand. And so I'm giving my presentation. It's all translated because they don't, you know, there are very few people that speak English in that group. And I'm seeing some chattering, and what I learned is that they do not follow the nursing process, which is you assess the patient, you gather data, you come up with an idea of what the problem is, you develop some interventions, you implement them, you evaluate them, and then see how the patient does. They don't work with the nursing process, and one of the things that they were asking us then was, tell us more about the nursing process. How do you think like a nurse? And so that totally flipped the way I taught, because I made grand assumptions about them understanding this nursing process, when in fact, in practice, they don't do assessments. They are not allowed to listen to somebody's lungs. They can take a pulse, they can check blood pressure, but they can't do some basic things that we do all the time. So there have been some great leaps made in helping the nurses understand that this is the scope of practice, and this is what nurses can do with that information that ties in with the physician. And so here's a summary of our travel into Moldova. We have gone for about 10 days for the past, since 2014 was when I think there was a nurse that went to do some training in some different kinds of IV technologies. And then starting in 2015, we begin to formulate what I would call our Moldova SWAT team. We've constituted nurses from North Carolina A&T, UNC Greensboro, Cone Health, GTCC, and then we have now, more recently, a public health official, the Director of Emergency and Disaster Preparedness, who's a part of our team and has worked with some public health areas. And we have a few people that we have looped in from UNC Chapel Hill as well. And so we have most recently gone this past year to Moldova, and some achievements that I can summarize for you now in the time that we have is we have had some great movement in the area of education. So when you think about, you know, with nursing education, you can do continuing education, help nurses do what they do by adopting best practices and enhancing knowledge, but so that would be from the ground up. And then from the top down would be where you actually change the structure of education, and so that's what we're doing. One of the outcomes so far is that there is now a baccalaureate of nursing program, first ever in Moldova, and that has been worked on for a number of years. Dr. Remsburg was involved in that initiative, and what this has done, it required a lot of collaboration with the medical university to even get this to move forward, because as an aside, in nursing, nurses don't teach nurses in the curriculum because there isn't a progression of education that allows you to become doctorally prepared or master's prepared, or here we know even baccalaureate prepared in nursing. So who teaches the nurses? The doctors. So nurses who come out of this training, their College of Nursing, which has a program that's either 3 or 5 years long, when they come out of the College of Nursing, then they go on to medical school and get a degree that allows them to teach the nursing program. Well, you can imagine that what is being taught in the nursing program may not be a nursing model. It would be a medical model, and it is. But in practice, nurses are really doing more functional nursing kinds of things, taking some blood pressures and giving some medications and then doing some basic care. But they're not operating at full scope of practice that could have a greater impact on the health and well-being of the patients. So we've impacted the education system. There are 5 colleges of nursing across the country. We have done education, particularly in geriatrics, because of the aging population crisis. But through the geriatric education, we've imparted and talked about the nursing process. So we're using unfolding case studies and different kinds of teaching methods have accomplished the 2 goals. One is providing education to practicing nurses as well as the College of Nursing faculty in general education in nursing and in geriatrics, but then also teaching education strategies that will engage the student in the learning process regarding nursing. We've also worked with home care workers. We worked with the HESED organization to do care practices for home care workers. And we've also done a lot with oncology. So imagine this. the nurses who are working in oncology are mixing the chemotherapy agents without any personal protective equipment on. They are exposed every day to these toxic chemicals, and we've been able to impact their standards for getting the right equipment. I just want to highlight our team here. So here's Dean Remsburg. This was most recently in the fall, in the center picture, the medical faculty that came from the medical university in Moldova, who are shaping and forming the Baccalaureate of Nursing program that actually started last October with 17 students. And so these are the visiting faculty who were here to learn more about education and teaching and nursing. That's our chancellor at the university. And then on the far left, a lot of books have been provided to Moldova, nursing textbooks. And then on the right is a simulation that I did with nurses to learn. It was an unfolding case study to learn about care of the older adult. One thing that we did a hand hygiene campaign as well. That, you know, in Moldova, one of the things we observed is the hand washing was virtually absent because there were either no sinks or a dirty towel hanging by a sink that existed. So in the second year that we returned, one of the things I thought about, what could we do that's a project that would be a small project that would have a big impact? So we implemented the WHO, the hand hygiene campaign, and also glow germ was you see how what we do is you put this lotion on the hand and you show a black light, and you do that before and after you hand wash, and after you hand wash you see how well you did. Well, we got these supplies from a company called Glow Germ, and it turns out the owner is a Rotarian. And since then, he has provided our supplies to continue to do this training, and we leave the equipment so that the nurses can do that training with their staff. And then finally, I want to speak to the hospitality of Moldovans. They open up their homes, their everything, and they provide such an abundance of mainly food and wine, as well as their hospitality. But it's been an extraordinary experience. I hope some of you will have the opportunity to go to Moldova. And thank you so much for your time this morning.